Hi everyone, my name is John. Welcome back to my channel. And several months back, I did a buddy read with someone else who participates in a storathon. Her name is Erica. She has a great channel here on BookTube called Passage of Time, which I will link to below. And we read a book that I had picked up not too long before we agreed to read it about Thomas Becket. And Beckett's, infamous series of rows with Henry II. And I just wanted to talk about it. It's been a while since I've read it, and I wrote a review. And this is John Guy, who you probably know, if you know him at all, for a series of books about Tudor history. But this is his book on a markedly medieval subject. This is Thomas Becket, Warrior, Priest, Rebel. A 900-year-old story retold. Greek tragedies continue to captivate audiences more than 2 millennia after they were written because they speak to a deep underlying frailty of human beings and what they perceive to be their good intentions. The case of King Henry II and his Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Becket, reads like something that could have come from the pen of Aeschylus or Euripides, but is even more compelling because it belongs to history. In Thomas Becket, Warrior, Priest, Rebel, John Guy, like I said, mostly known for his books about Tudor history, jumps back in time to examine one of the most ill-fated relationships that history has to talk about, and that Henry ever had, and that he ever had. And for anyone who has seen The Lion in Winter, another great story about Henry II, that's really saying a lot. So Thomas was born into the family of a textile merchant who was able to give his wife and his children a solidly middle-class upbringing. Becket was nevertheless constantly reminded of his origins as a commoner once he started to work his way up the social ladder. His intelligence and ambition were noted early on when he was a student at a London grammar school, and later, around the age of 20, when he was made to seek out a position as a clerk because of his father's failing business adventures. It was around this time when he met the newly appointed Archbishop of Canterbury, who was kind of his mentor, whose name was Theobald of Bec. And Theobald realized Thomas's potential, and he sent him on important diplomatic trips, and even allowed him, funded his study to study canon law in France. And after the death of King Stephen, Becket's superior service to Theobald led to his name being, that is Thomas's name, being advanced as a candidate for the newly crowned Henry II's Lord Chancellor. His chancellorship, which lasted from 1155 to 1162, was one of relative peace and concord. As a functionary of the state, he was obliged to do the bidding of the king and toe the line, and he pretty much did. But after 7 years of chancellorship, Becket was nominated to replace Theobald, his mentor, who had served as Archbishop of Canterbury for nearly a quarter of a century. And Henry's hopes that Thomas would continue to serve as a useful yes man went awry after his transition to the primacy. Becket made a suspiciously timed transition from ambitious servant of the state to a conspicuous ascetic when he was given the archbishopric, frequently donning a hair shirt and staking his claim for the older, more expansive rights of the archbishop, which archbishops had under King Stephen, but had them taken away under the Henry II. In a matter of months, Becket changed drastically from a steadfast protector of a strong kingship into someone who refused to give an ecclesiastical inch to royal authority. And as you might guess, that was a big problem for Henry II. During the anarchy, the church's jurisdiction began to loom ever larger in the wake of the weakened King Stephen. Henry wanted to push back against this, culminating in the Constitution of Clarendon, which was a set of resolutions that would have set church-state relationships back to the way that they were before the anarchy under Henry's grandfather, who was Henry I. When Becket agreed to the spirit of the Constitution, but nevertheless refused to sign it, Henry charged him with malfeasance against the state. He was convicted. Becket dressed as a lowly monk and got the hell out of Dodge and went to France. An uneasy peace was imposed when the Pope, at the time, who was Alexander III, interceded on Becket's behalf and allowed him to return to England. The last straw came when 3 of Henry's churchmen, including the Archbishop of York himself, agreed to have Henry the young king's coronation at Westminster Cathedral. Traditionally, the privilege of coronation was given to the Archbishop of Canterbury. Becket, who was mad at having his authority infringed upon, refused to budge on the issue, leading Henry to wonder aloud the famous words that he probably didn't say, but we all recognize, "Will no one rid me of this turbulent priest?" So now that he was shrouded in a cloak of plausible deniability, it's impossible to know what Henry really meant by those suggestive words, if he did in fact say them, which he almost certainly didn't, but we know how they were interpreted by those who were in the room when he didn't say them. On the morning of December 29th, 1170, 4 knights entered Canterbury Cathedral with armor hidden under their clothes. When Thomas was asked to recant, Becket gave the answer that he would finally seal his fate. He refused to recant. That night, on his way to evening prayer, they drew their swords on Becket. A contemporary account from Edward Grimm, who was actually there, details how after the first sword blow took off the pate of Becket's head and subsequent ones bludgeoned him half to death, Becket decided to deliver one last middle finger to Henry, saying, quote, "For the name of Jesus and the protection of the church, I am ready to embrace death." After Becket's assassination, Henry made a series of dubious displays of penitence, including wearing a sackcloth, visiting Becket's tomb, and even financially supporting the quickly growing cult of Becket that appeared after his murder. Becket's life usually gets no more than a few pages in a very fraught, larger narrative of early Plantagenet kingship. But seeing Becket fleshed out as a human being, and also seeing Henry II fleshed out as a human being, which you see much more often, but it's still a fascinating story, replete with their respective strengths and foibles, of which they had many of both. It really makes for a wonderful reading and captivating psychological picture of what these two egomaniacs were at the height of their power. Guy studiously susses out the sources and leans heavily on the accounts of contemporaries like the one I just cited from Edward Grimm. It's easy to see Becket as either a saint or a villain, a traitor to the king and state, or a staunch defender of ecclesiastical authority, depending on where you're coming from. The truth is, as usually the case, a little bit more subtle, and he helps spell out why that is in the book. You know, the biography has done his the biographer has done his job well when he leaves you suspicious of the person you'd previously pegged as the good guy and lets all black and white admit to shades of gray. And that's kind of what John Guy does. It's not hagiography. He's not taking anyone's sides, but it's a really well done life of two people, and it was kind of fated for Becket to lose in the end, to lose his reputation and his life. But it's a really good book, and a well told story. I thought, for someone who's never read a biography of Thomas Becket before. This is Thomas Becket, Warrior, Priest, Rebel, by John Guy. I'll see you next time. Bye.